Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bultan of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about.
In today's episode, I talk with New Deal leader, Lieutenant Governor of Illinois, Juliana Stratton, who recently announced her candidacy for the U.S. Senate. Lieutenant Governor and I talk about the Republican federal budget and contrast it with the priorities and successes of the Pritzker-Stratton administration, which has centered their agenda around working families, and been able to pass balanced budgets while expanding healthcare and bringing down costs. Lieutenant Governor shares what she's hearing from people on the ground who are looking for someone to fight for them, as well as her own path into elected office, which began with her fighting for healthcare for seniors in need. We also talk about her work in negotiation and conflict resolution, being tapped by JB Pritzker to be his running mate in 2017, and lessons learned as an endurance runner. Make sure to stay to the end to hear her inspiring story about her father and her challenge to all of us to meet this moment by standing up and being counted. I hope you enjoy. All right, Juliana Stratton, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thanks for having me.
I have been looking forward to this. We have not had a chance to see each other in a while, and you've had big news since we last saw each other. There's a lot going on in the world, so I've been looking forward to having a conversation with you. I thought we could just dive right in. We are living through some really crazy times right now, of course, with Washington, the backdrop of the budget conversation and all of the things that the Republicans are trying to cut in the budget. So I thought I'd maybe just talk to you a little bit about, I find there's such an interesting contrast of what the Republicans are trying to do in Washington and what you and Governor Pritzker have been able to do in Illinois. And so maybe that's a good way in to start with things, talking a little bit about those differences, including maybe starting with healthcare, which is something I know is very important to you personally. Hearing a lot about the Medicaid, drastic cuts to Medicaid coming down the pike. Talk a little bit about both what you and the governor have been able to do in Illinois and kind of what you're watching and worrying about coming out of DC.
Well, let me begin by just saying that healthcare is what really led me to run for office in the first place. And it was 10 years ago that I was caring for my mom who had Alzheimer's, and I was her primary caregiver. And at the time, I saw the previous governor of Illinois, as well as my state representative, work together to strip seniors of their health care. And this was health care that would help them to stay in their homes, to live with dignity. And it was essential. And I could not believe that there was an effort to take away health care from some of our most vulnerable Illinoisans, especially at a time that I was caring for my mom. She didn't get those benefits, but I knew how important it was for seniors like my mom. And at the time, I actually yelled at the television, this is 2015, someone should run against him. And speaking of my state representative, and I didn't know it would be me, but I saw that there was a need, and I felt that I was the one to step up and meet that need. And that's what I did. And that's what led me to run for office. And I ran and I won, and I ended up serving in the Illinois House. And so it was that story of my mother, who we actually lost the day before my campaign for state representative began. But it was that moment that really drove me to run for elected office. And here we are 10 years later, 2025, and we are seeing the exact kind of thing happen. People being stripped of their health care, people being stripped of SNAP benefits that will give them the opportunity to have healthy, nutritious food. And it's really another example of why I think so many of us are saying this is a time for courage. It's a time to step up And it's why I'm running for United States Senator. What I will say in terms of the contrast here in Illinois, well, as we see the chaos coming out of Washington and efforts to strip people of health care, here in Illinois, we are expanding access to health care. We have stepped up to end predatory insurance practices, such as step therapy. We passed what's called the Healthcare Protection Act to make sure that people should be able to work with their doctors and not insurance companies to see what kind of care they need. We have eliminated medical debt. That has been so important and something that I was proud to lead, for the administration was the Birth Equity Initiative that really focuses on addressing the maternal mortality crisis, which specifically impacts, disproportionately, I should say, impacts Black women. And so there's so many ways that we are working to make sure that people have access to health care, that it's expanded. We just passed legislation and the governor signed into law to lower the cost of prescription drugs, because that, again, was another area where we saw it was not only too expensive, but I've talked to seniors who have said, I've had to cut my medication in half so that I could stretch it. That shouldn't be the case. So I'm disgusted by what's happening in Washington right now. But I'm really proud of what we're doing in Illinois. The governor and I are working hard to make sure that we center the voices of middle-class families, working families, who are really just trying to make sure that they have the lives they deserve. And that's what we'll keep doing.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for all that you're doing on that and so many other fronts. I will say that one of the amazing things that's happening in Washington is not only are they making all those cuts to the healthcare programs you talked about that so many people rely on and need, but they're blowing a hole in the deficit even more as well. And this is, the most fiscally irresponsible budget I think that you could imagine. And so that's another context for what the work you and the governor have been able to do in your tenure, is to do all of this while you're still balancing budgets and delivering for people. Tell me about that, that goal and how you've been able to do that and still keep the programs that are essential to working families, as you said, in your state.
Well, that same governor that was stripping away healthcare 10 years ago is also the governor that was leading our state when we went almost 2 years without a budget in the state of Illinois. I mean, when I came in,
about that actually.
Yeah, when I came
in,
state legislature, that's exactly what we were facing. And when you think about what the primary responsibility of any unit of government, it's to pass a balanced budget, is to make sure that we are looking at, the revenues that we are bringing in and what our expenses, and as we care for the people of our state, and make sure that we're not, spending outside of our means. And but unfortunately, with almost 2 years without a budget, it caused so much damage. I mean, people weren't sending their kids to our colleges and state universities because they weren't sure if they were going to keep their doors open. It really shred our social service safety net. And there were just so many ways that so much damage that was done. And I think when I look at what's happening in Washington, I see something that is very familiar to what that looked like here in Illinois before we took office. But under the Pritzker-Stratton administration, we prioritized fiscal responsibility and demonstrated that Democrats are the party of fiscal responsibility. I mean, we have now passed 7 consecutive balanced budgets. We have seen 9 credit rating upgrades. We started with a rainy day fund with, I think, less than $60,000. And now we have continued to increase that and make sure that we have funding, $2 billion plus of funding that's available as needed to help in an emergency. It's not enough, and we're going to keep doing more, but every year we've been building that. We've paid down our bill backlog because those 2 years without a budget led to so many of our vendors not getting paid, and we had a bill backlog that was just totally unacceptable. And now we've paid down all of that, and we're paying our bills on time. And so I think what people are looking for is the kind of environment that not only families can depend on, but our business community can depend on. all of this stability is one of the ways that we can attract businesses, let our small businesses know that we have the kind of environment that they can depend on, the predictability they can depend on. But that's the exact opposite of what we're seeing in Washington. I mean, I'm talking to people every day about how the trade wars and the tariffs have impacted their business. Every single day, there's a new level of chaos, the executive orders, the court decisions, and certainly what we're seeing with this budget. It's going to have a severe impact, not just, I like to say, not just on families directly impacted. So, for example, if a family utilizes Medicaid, and by the way, many families do, including here in Illinois, 1.4 million children get their health care because they're covered by Medicaid. But when you take away Medicaid, even if you do not have Medicaid coverage, it's going to affect you even if you have private insurance. It's going to be longer wait times. There are going to be hospitals that will close, especially in our rural communities. So I don't want anybody to look at what's happening and say, well, that doesn't apply to me. We are all going to be impacted by what we are seeing happening out of Washington, D.C. We should all be concerned, and we should all be speaking out and making our voices heard that this is not the kind of leadership that was promised. These are broken promises, and I think this is a time for us to be courageous.
Yeah, I have to say that you have been incredibly effective and powerful on your social, and I'm sure in the state too, in person. But I often interact with you through social, of really holding the administration's feet to the fire, and calling out what's happening and what you're seeing on the ground. So I want to just give you another opportunity, because you've talked a lot already about kind of some of the impacts you're seeing and what you're hearing from people. But as you travel around the state, are there other things that you're hearing in terms of you talked about the tariffs and the uncertainty and the economics? What else is on people's minds in your state right now?
Well, if you want to hear the truth, Debbie, what people say to me more than anything else as I travel around the state and say, tell me about what's going on in your world. What issues do you want to talk about? The first thing they say to me is, I want someone to stand up for me. I want someone to fight for me. And I just, I hear that because people are scared. People are wondering, are they going to be okay? Are they going to be able to care for their families? Are they going to be able to put food on the table? Are they, if something happens, if they break a leg or have to have a sick young one, are they going to be able to provide the care that they need? So I think it's not a policy issue that comes out first. What comes out first is the kind of leadership and energy that they are looking for. They are looking for fighters. They're looking for people who are not going to just go along to get along. They're not looking for people who are just sitting on the sidelines, but they want people who are going to use their bully pulpits, people who are going to call out the nonsense and really speak very boldly about what's happening and tell them that it's not okay and that we're going to do everything we can. And I certainly want to give kudos to so many, not just governors, lieutenant governors, and others that are doing that, but specifically attorneys general who have been so important at this time, filing case after case to try to stop what we believe, and certainly I believe, is just a disregard for the rule of law and a disregard for our Constitution. Now, the other thing, so once I hear that, I think from there, what people are looking for is a couple of things. They want to make sure that life is more affordable. And that's why when we talk about things like eliminating and erasing medical debt or eliminating our grocery tax here in Illinois, both things that we've done in our administration, lowering the price of prescription drugs, those are ways, tangible ways, that we are making life more affordable for the people that we represent. And then, of course, people want to make sure that we defend their fundamental rights. I mean, right now we're looking at an administration that, again, as I just said, disregards the rule of law and stomps on the Constitution. And people are scared. What's going to happen? They're seeing people being, taken off the streets, no due process. They are, worried about, whether, what could happen in their own communities. They're seeing what's happening with their neighbors. And that's why I think people are so focused on the need for a fighter. I think they believe that, if we have someone to fight for us, who will listen to our needs, who is focused on the everyday sort of kitchen table issues that people are concerned about. That as long as it's somebody who's going to really get in there and fight for them, that's what really matters at this time.
Yeah. Well, and I go back to what you were talking about what got you into politics in the first place, which was this very personal experience you were having and anger about what was happening right at the state level and how that was going to impact your mom or other people like your mom. Did you, I'm just completely curious about you because your trajectory's been amazing, right? And we're going to get to the fact that you're running for U.S. Senate in a second. But so, you had, when you decided to take that leap and run for state legislature, had it ever been in your mind that you might run for public office before that? Or what was that? Was that something that you had been considering earlier or no?
Yeah. So I thought about it. I mean, I've been a public servant my entire career. I'm a lawyer and practiced in a small firm for a few years. But then after that, I started my own alternative dispute resolution firm because while I really was good at fighting it out in court and could win those cases and am a strong advocate, what I loved was the idea of this process of bringing people in conflict together and having them sit across the table and helping them think through their positions and their needs and their interests, and hopefully coming up with a win-win solution that not only would help them resolve their substantive issues, but hopefully would help them preserve their relationship. And I did that for quite a long time, a couple of decades actually. And most of it was done through governmental agencies. I also taught negotiation skills. So those mediation skills and the negotiation skills served me very well as a state legislator and as a lieutenant governor. And I just think those are skills that people need to have. People in conflict, bringing them together, solving problems, and being able to negotiate the best outcome for everyone.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, but I was not always thinking, like I didn't have this sort of image or roadmap of, all my life I want to be a lieutenant governor or a senator or even a state rep. I was in public service. I worked in government agencies. I had been a part of a program that trained women to run for office, Democratic women to run for office, the Illinois Women's Institute for Leadership. But I didn't really know where this was going. And I wasn't sure when that opportunity would arise. So this isn't sort of this, I don't come from a political family. I didn't have all those political relationships. It literally was based upon the fact that I saw a need and felt that I was the one to meet that need. So that's kind of how that came about. And the first elected office, by the way, I should say that I do count this. I ran for a local school council at a public high school, the high school that I attended. And that was standing outside of the school gym for about 6 hours with $35 worth of flyers asking families to vote for me. I won that election and served as the chair of the local school council at a Chicago public high school. And I thought at the time that that's how elections worked. You just stand outside for 6 hours with the flyers and you can get elected. Turns out that is not how it always works. So.
Yeah. But oh my gosh, I love the fact that you're reminding me about that background you had in negotiation and bringing people together in conflict resolution, which I should say, by the way, we could do a whole different podcast on this, is you really have led for the governor the criminal justice reform aspects of your administration as well, and using those skills and thinking about and leading on restorative justice. And so I just want to put a shout out to that too. I mean, that's been a big part, I know, of your career as a public servant. But you were not in the legislature for very long before the governor asked you to be his running mate for lieutenant governor. That must have been a crazy experience to be picked up and tapped for this big job.
Well, then at the time it was just JB was deciding to run. He asked me to sit down with him. He wanted to visit my district and learn more. And I was just so impressed by that. He was the only gubernatorial candidate at the time that really asked to sit down with me and to learn about my district and what the issues were. And he came, we had breakfast at a local restaurant here in the community that I live in on the south side of Chicago. And we had a great conversation. And through that conversation, he asked very pointed questions. He was genuinely interested in what were the issues that my community and my district were facing. I did not know, but maybe that was the beginning of some sort of interview process. But, I just saw it as a great conversation. And so months kept going by. I was a new legislator, as you just mentioned. And we would keep in touch periodically. And when it came time for him to ask me to be his running mate, I had only been a state rep for about 6 or 7 months. So it was very early, but I think what he saw was that, when you're a state rep and it's a 2-year term, and of course, this wasn't something that I had always planned on, I didn't know how long I would be there. And so I rolled up my sleeves and I got to work, and I actually passed 11 bills and got them signed into law in my first term my one and only term as a state representative. When he asked me to be his running mate, though, Debbie, something that I think is just indicative of the kind of leader he is and the kind of leader I am, and the way that I wanted to make sure that we were a good fit, is I asked him, I said, he asked if I would be his running mate. And I said, I am absolutely honored. I think you're the right person to be the governor of our state. I believe you're going to be the one to turn our state around after so much damage. But I don't want to do this if all you want me to do is the things you don't want to do. And I had to make it very clear to him, I did not want to be sort of in this sort of performative role where I was there to, just perfunctory, I don't want to go to this and you go to it. You're the lieutenant governor, to give it to her. And I said, I have a lot of issues that I care about, including transforming our criminal legal system and many other issues, healthcare access and women's reproductive freedom, so many things that I care about. And if I do this, I want to be able to bring my full self. And he said, to his credit, I would not have it any other way. And that was a sign to me that he, wanted me to bring my leadership skills, my experience. We're two different people from two very different backgrounds. And I think that's why we worked so well together and have been true partners in governance, because he respects who I am and what I bring to the table. And the feeling is very mutual. And we just worked and continue to work very well together.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's such a testament to you and to him, to your point about, having a true partner who's obviously taken on so much, in terms of some of the stuff we've already talked about, but some of the ag connects us all, some of the criminal justice stuff. So it just feels like you guys have just done such a great job together as a team. So thank you for that service. But you have announced that you are running for U.S. Senate now. That another big decision, very exciting decision. And in the backdrop of what we were talking about kind of what's happening in Washington and how just concerning all of what we were talking about, the economy and the rule of law and everything that's going on. Tell me about that decision to run for Senate and what you hope to bring to the body.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think a couple of things. One, like so many, I was devastated after the last election. And I think there were a number of people who kind of felt like, I'm just not sure what I can do, how much more I can give. And for me, that was really a moment for me to say, this is a time to lean in. I woke up to my youngest daughter in tears as she heard about the outcome. And I just felt like this was a moment not to give up or to give in, but to say, you know what more can I do? I didn't know that there would be an opportunity, and I didn't know what more looked like for me, but I knew that I had fight in me, and I knew that there were so many people who were going to be worried about what their future looked like, what the future looked like, not just for them, but for their children and their children's children. And so I just started thinking about what else could I do. And so thought about it both as lieutenant governor, just as a human being, how do I stay engaged? How do I lean in? And a couple of months later, and I started just kind of, preparing, wasn't sure what the future would hold. I knew that Senator Dick Durbin, who has served our state, admirably for so many years, has been a real champion for the working families of Illinois, and actually played a really important role as I started, out in public life and giving me some pointers and encouragement as I ran for office. When he decided that he was not going to run for reelection in 2026, I was ready because I started, putting things together to say, if this really happens, I want to be prepared and ready because that's the urgency of this moment. And so he announced, and I quickly got things together and announced that I would be running for United States Senate to fill that vacancy. I enjoyed 10 glorious days with, of just out there on my own and letting people know. And I was proud to earn not only the governor's endorsement, but Senator Tammy Duckworth, who will be our next senior senator, who endorsed my campaign. Ambassador Carol Moseley Braun endorsed right after that. She was the first Black woman to head to the United States Senate. And after that, I just have been gaining what I believe is, and confident, I'm confident is a winning coalition. And these are people from all across the state of Illinois. So it wasn't, like I said, this sort of grandiose plan. But what I did know is that what I've said earlier, people are looking for a fighter. And I'm proud that I can look them in the eye and say, I will be that fighter for you. And I also know, though, that you can't just say, I'm going to fight and talk about what you're against. You have to talk about what you are for. And what I am for is the kinds of things that we have already done here in Illinois. I believe Illinois is a blueprint. I believe Illinois is the blueprint for the kind of progress that we need to make at the federal level. Will it be easy? No. But I've never shied away from challenges. And in fact, as I said, when we got into office, it was a challenging time. But by working together, by having a bold vision, by making sure we were clear about our values and centering the voices of middle-class families across our state, look what we've been able to accomplish. We raised the minimum wage. It was $8.25 when we took office. It's now $15 an hour in Illinois, lifting so many people out of poverty and giving people in lower wage jobs just a real opportunity to advance economically. It's still at $7.25 at the federal level. Who can raise a family on $7.25 an hour? So I want to see that kind of work done at the federal level. We've protected reproductive freedom here in Illinois and a woman's right to choose. And that's not just an important thing to do from a health and reproductive rights standpoint. It is, to me, should be a fundamental right to decide what's best for your own body. But it's also an economic issue. The decision of whether or not to bring a child into this world or to have a family, to start a family and grow a family, there's an economic argument behind that. And we need to recognize that. Well, we're seeing women's rights, just a total disregard for women and women's rights at the federal level. And I want to fight for that. So I think this is an opportunity to bring new voices, new perspectives, new ideas and energy to Washington. And that's exactly what I look forward to bringing as the next United States Senator for the great state of Illinois.
Well, here. I love that. I love all of that. And I just want to end on something that I love about you. There's so many things to love about you, to be honest. But you talked about your fighting spirit. We can see it, we can hear it. We talked about your work as a lawyer and a conflict resolution person. You're a mother of 4. But a fun fact that people might not know is I love the story about your running, and that's what I want to end with, because you will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you took up running relatively later in life, right? And became a marathon runner, a triathlete. And I think that's so indicative of what you're talking about, is essentially this kind of the persistence, the putting your mind to something and getting it done. I wonder if you would just say a word or two about your running and maybe the lessons that you apply from that part of your life to politics and to this journey.
I'll say a word or two and then maybe one quick story, if you don't mind, that I think really helps me think through. And I've been thinking a lot about it. So running for me, and I'm not a fast runner, but I got into endurance sports because that's really what this moment requires. And I think that's what life requires. And that's what hard times require, challenging times, the ability to endure, the ability to keep going, the ability to push back the roadblocks and the obstacles, and to believe that you can accomplish something great. And when I started running, I could not run one single mile. And the fact that I've done, I think now 5 marathons, which is 26.2 miles, not fast. I didn't win, as my daughter said. Did you win? Nope, I did not win.
That was not
But
the
I
goal.
completed, and I'm not
That's
competing against anyone else. I am trying to be my best self. And I'm trying to remind myself that I can not only do hard things, but I can push past the obstacles and get to a point where I can say, look what we accomplished. And that's what, not just life is, and it encourages me in life, but it's what we're dealing with right now, where so many people are giving up hope. So many people are asking, are we going to be okay? And we are at one of those hard times. And it is a time that's going to require us to dig deep and find that part of ourselves that says, I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to push past, and I'm going to make it. And I'm not going to do it just on my own. I'm going to do it with others around me in my community and those who share my values. We are going to do this work together. Now, the quick story is about my dad, and I'll finish with this. My dad, Henry, he's 92. He's a Navy veteran, community physician that only worked at safety nest hospitals. So this brings us back to the issue of healthcare. I told you 10 years ago I was caring for my mom, but 60 years ago, while my mom was pregnant with me, 1965, my dad marched from Selma to Montgomery. And there's a framed article in my office that he wrote, a sort of a little essay that he wrote for a local newspaper back then about why he did that. He had never done anything really politically before, and he decided to march where Dr. King and late Congressman John Lewis marched. And he said, I decided to march because I didn't like how people were being treated. And boy, does that resonate with so many of us right now. We don't like how people are being treated. And I guess somebody must have asked him, well, what did you think you'd accomplished by marching? And my dad, Henry, said that I would stand up and be counted. I would stand up and be counted. And that is where we are right now. And it goes back to running. It goes back to enduring. It goes back to doing hard things. My dad was protesting discrimination in voting rights. He didn't know what the marching would do. He didn't know if it would lead to the Voting Rights Act or what it would do, but he knew he had to stand up and do something. And I believe that's where each and every one of us are at this moment.
Absolutely.
My decision is to run for United States Senate. That is my standing up and being counted. You have one, Debbie. You're doing great work with NewDEAL leaders and just so much to develop so many leaders to be out there in the world making real policy changes and a difference in our communities. So to everyone listening, in what way are you going to stand up and be counted? Because that's the moment we're in. We all must walk in whatever purpose we have on this earth to make sure that we allow our children and our children's children and every generation to inherit a world better than the way we found it. So that is my connection. It's not just the running. It's also in my DNA. My dad, Henry, who said he would stand up and be counted. And I carry that with me every single day.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. That was beautiful and inspiring. And I'm grateful for what you said about me. And I'm grateful for the work that you are doing and so many NewDEAL leaders across the country. And it is a time for us all to stand up, to be counted, and to change, to make the change we know needs to happen. So
That's right.
Thank you for that. And thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me.
An Honorable Profession is a NewDEAL Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at NewDEAL for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,